sorry, I didn't get the right thing. I think it was, yeah, 6-2, third bullet. It says create a city incentive program that partners with, I think we all know what it means, but I thought it might be better to say create a city home appliance electrification incentive program. Unless we wanted to keep this so general, it covered all aspects of building electrification, but it seems like our first step was going to be focused on appliances because that was going to be easy, and doing more intensive building electrification was going to be a little bit more tricky. But anyway, that was my one comment.
I think as far as the minutes go, procedurally, we cannot change action that was taken on the minutes. We can only change errors or incorrect information on
Well,
minutes.
yeah, I guess what I'm saying is my recollection was it was focused on doing, I didn't take good enough notes. In fact, I had a reference, Lizzie wrote these down. There were the 3, and that was the third bullet. So anyway, if you feel that's an accurate representation of what we said, then that's fine.
I think I took this directly from a document we had pulled up that we wordsmithed together. I can double check that, but this is taken directly from what we all looked at together. And again, I don't think we can change the word.
No, that's okay. I withdraw.
Okay. I'll double check and bring this back.
That's fine.
Not the case. Okay, so I'll still double check, but you're withdrawing your.
No, I didn't think about that, so don't worry about it. I just thought, I guess I could bring it up later when we discuss that, so that's fine.
Any other questions or comments on the minutes? Okay. If anyone wants
motion to approve the minutes.
I'll motion to approve the minutes.
Second.
Okay. Vice Chair Chen.
Aye.
Committee Member Larson.
Aye.
Committee Member Merchant.
Aye.
Committee Member Peterson.
Aye.
Committee Member Woolley.
Yes.
Chair Choi.
Yes.
Motion carries. Minutes approved.
Okay, and if anyone from the public on the call has a comment on something not on the agenda, they can raise their hand.
We currently have 0 attendees, so no hands raised.
Okay, and since there's no presentations for today, could we move on to let's move on to the announcements.
Yes. Started off with sustainability events and resources. Last night, Michelle and I co-hosted along with Energy Upgrade California with special guests Bayren, Rising Sun Center for Opportunity, and EBCE, a renter energy efficiency for renters webinar. We had 11 attendees. We do not know if those renter attendees were from Albany or from neighboring cities that cross-promoted our event, but we had a pretty good discussion about how to approach energy efficiency as renters. And we thought it went well. It was a good test run because we have a second webinar on energy efficiency for homeowners next Monday at 5 o'clock. If you're interested in learning more, visit albanyca.org/calendar and look at next Monday's calendar item. Michelle will be driving the bus for that one. So if you have specific questions about that webinar, please direct them to Michelle. We have around 50 participants registered for that webinar. So we would still love if committee members would give a big push to your networks because doing these events is a great way to remind the community that even though electrification is the big hot button item, energy efficiency is a stepping stone that's necessary in order for us to achieve electrification. And it can save individuals money and improve their indoor air quality and comfort if we achieve greater energy efficiency. So we're hoping to reach more folks with these webinars. The last one. Then coming up in, June 6th and June 13th from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. there will be virtual East Bay Green Home Tours. You can join virtual tours of local all-electric homes and ask questions of the homeowners and other experts on the call how to do an electrification project in the East Bay. Each tour segment consists of a 10-minute video tour followed by a live 10-minute Q&A with the homeowner or the tenant. And there will be lots of time for Q&A for questions about induction cooking, heat pumps, air quality, solar storage, power outage issues, rebates, and more. And you can find information about these green home tours on our still live albanyca.org/Earth Day webpage. We'll take down that webpage once these tours are done. Those are the two sustainability events and resources on my radar. Chair Choi, I do notice that we have a member of the public with their hand up. Would you like to move to public comment on this announcement? I think you may be on mute.
Oh, Jeremiah, you can speak.
Oh, one sec, Jeremiah. Jeremiah?
Hi, sorry, it was a Zoom bomb with my hand. I'm sorry.
Oh, so you do not have public comment?
Oh, just general public comment?
No, this is on the announcement.
Yeah, I have.
We're
right on the announcements.
On sustainability
no, I'm sorry.
events and resources.
I don't. I'm sorry.
That's okay. Thank you, Jeremiah.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Okay. All right. Now we'll move on to, Committee Member Peterson.
Yeah, could we somehow track, like I'm thinking about outreach, and one of our things that we're doing on our work plan is reaching out and contacting people. So any way to, since we do these seminars, since we don't have people sign in, can we keep track of how many people we're reaching? I mean, we're putting a lot of effort into these, and if we're only reaching 20 or 25 people, period, I think we need to start talking about different venues or ways to get the word out.
I think, unless I'm missing something, I track it based on how many folks sign up and read the sign up materials and then how many show up. But beyond that, I don't know how to track it beyond that.
That seems like a good way to do it, rather than not knowing at all. I mean,
yeah, we typically keep track of how many people show up.
great.
Okay, any other questions on the sustainability events and resources update? If not, we will go to update on recent and planned City Council actions related to climate action, and I will pass the mic to Jeff.
Yes, good afternoon or good evening, everybody. Jeff Bond. There were several items of interest to the committee at the City Council meeting Monday night. Several of them are later on your agenda about the budget and the work plan, so we'll come back to those. But an interesting thing happened with the Climate Safe California campaign endorsement, which was on the consent calendar. Vice Mayor Jordan pulled it off of the consent calendar and expressed his concern about this campaign. And he noted that he read through the materials and he saw a reference to a scientific study that talked about sequestration. And he discovered that apparently the information that this organization is putting forth as evidence from this study was mischaracterized. And in particular, they were citing this study as saying that 100 million tons per year could be sequestered. And Preston, who's a geologist by profession and is working in this area, had some concerns about that. His research, or the work that he's aware of, the research that he's aware of, indicates that 18 million tons is the high, or this particular study that was referenced actually said it was 18 million tons, not 100 million tons. And he was able to, through his work and looking at other studies, confirm that 18 million is probably on the high side of what we expect technology to be able to accomplish in the next few years. So he made a motion, and the other council members agreed with the motion to not endorse the campaign because of that that mischaracterization. So although, and he went on to acknowledge that the cause is a noble one, it's just that he felt like their plan was not a credible one because of the mischaracterization of the research. So that caught us all by surprise a little bit, but I thought you should know about that. And I think the takeaway from that is maybe we do a little bit more due diligence on some of these things before we bring it to City Council. Particularly knowing the background of some of our council members, they may look at the details, and that's good for all of us to be aware of. Committee Member Peterson?
Yeah, so I'm kind of surprised at that, especially since Preston appointed me. I told him this was on there. I unfortunately wasn't able to make the meeting, but I would have loved to discuss that with him. I have direct contact with the Climate Center. I can certainly talk to them. There are a lot of pretty capable people there, so I think they would appreciate having a conversation with him. So I don't think this one's dead. I'm going to put them together and get it rectified. But I think what's important is that we need to put pressure on the state to move up and accelerate what we're doing. Sequestration was just 1/8 of the overall plan that they talked about, and was did have some optimistic things and is very critical, and we need to get it right. But I'd hate to see us just bail on what I think is an important effort.
And then Jeff, I don't know if you want to give an update on SB 612.
Oh, that thank you for the reminder. That was approved. The endorsement of SB 612 was approved by the City Council without any discussion. That was the
ratepayer equity bill.
Yeah. Thank you. I was struggling to find the very words. The legislation that EBCE recommended the city endorse.
Mm-hmm.
And I will now pass it on to Michelle, who can give you an update on green building measures.
Looks like you have a question.
Oh yeah, it's not a question, more of an announcement. I've been following SB 612. I think just maybe a quick interesting update for the committee. So it has actually passed the California Senate Appropriations Committee. It's on the suspense file. So it remains to be seen whether it will be ultimately passed, but I think it's really exciting to see how a piece of legislation was endorsed by this committee, made it to the City Council, and is sort of working its way through the legislative process at the state level.
Yes, excellent things, all of them. Another excellent thing, I'm happy to announce that the California Energy Commission last week approved Albany's green building resolution, which this committee worked so hard on. And that was the last real regulatory hurdle for the resolution. So now Albany can legally enforce it, and that will start happening mid next month, since there's a 30-day window between the approval and the actual implementation, just to kind of get the city and the staff all ready to go with implementing it. But it's great news.
I had a question about that. The large project that's proposed for San Pablo Avenue at the Albany Bowl, is it essentially already in the application phase, and therefore these requirements would not apply, or will these requirements now apply to that project?
I can answer that question generically. I have a conflict of interest, so I can't speak to that project. My wife has a potential conflict of interest, so I'm recusing myself from it. But I can say for any project that has a building permit, has not yet applied for a building permit, will be subject to these requirements unless they apply in the next 2.5 weeks or whatever it is. Once the resolution becomes effective next month, anything that is in the early stages of anything that's in the planning process but not yet into the building permit process will be required to comply.
Chair Choi, I think that's all we have for announcements. I don't know if you want to make a call for public comment.
Yeah, if anyone from the public has any comments they want to make on it, you can raise your hand.
Give it a couple seconds. Not seeing any hands raised.
Okay. And we have no presentations for tonight, so we'll just move right on to item 6-1, which is an update from our engagement and outreach subcommittee. Oh,
I apologize. Chair Choi has an update for the committee, so maybe we should do that before we move on to discussion. Chair Choi, if you'd like to tell the committee about your upcoming resignation, unfortunately, but for your very exciting next steps.
yeah. So my term is technically over in June or July, but I'm going somewhere on the East Coast for a family trip, so this is my last meeting, unfortunately. But next year I'll be attending UC Berkeley, so I'll still be like in the area. And yeah, thanks. I really enjoyed the past 2 years, just like listening and participating in these discussions, and I've been able to learn a lot about how like the city works, and it's just inspiring to see the members of the community so like dedicated and passionate about improving the environment. So yeah, thank you guys.
Oh, that's great, and congratulations on getting into Berkeley.
Congratulations, and go Bears.
Go Bears.
It's been great having you on the committee. Thanks for your service.
Great. Thank you, Chair Choi. Now I'll pass it back to you for headed back to discussion.
So we have an update from the outreach an update from our engagement and outreach subcommittee.
Yeah, committee members Merchant and Larson. I think we agreed that I would take this, and then you would fill in anything that I missed. Yep. So we have been meeting for the past month or so, a couple months, I would say, and thinking of ways to accomplish what we see as our primary objective as a subcommittee, which is to meet the work plan's goal of 2,000 subscribers, if you will, to carbon-free Albany in 2 years. It's a lofty goal, and we are trying to think of ideas. And one thing that we landed on was hosting a forum of some kind, where the main goal of the forum is to have key members of various community groups in Albany attend and get them hyped about carbon-free Albany, so that they can then spread the word to members of their community groups, because we figured that it'd be much easier access to households if we did it through groups that they already know and trust. So we're thinking something in September, and the subcommittee, the members of the subcommittee have pretty much said that we're willing to do much of the footwork on this, to make it happen, to put together messaging and outreach to get people to the forum, as well as content while we're there. So that is what we have planned so far, and we're really focusing on this goal of getting households to sign up for carbon-free Albany. Did I miss anything?
Well, I'll just add that this idea was partially based on the Carbon Free Albany website. People that run it. Patrick Journey is the sort of community relations rep, and their advice to groups like us is to get key members of the community involved in order to generate interest. And so that's what we're building off of is that direct sort of advice on how to build community and membership on the website. So rather than trying to do some big bulk, thing for the community, get key members involved and have them be the kernels to drive participation in their little local groups and get really close participation. So that's sort of where this came from.
The one thing I was just going to add is that we had kind of had a question over whether this is within our scope as members of the committee to organize and host something like this, and also what we might be able to rely on staff for in terms of using city resources to help spread the word, maybe get a location for it, and any maybe some technical assistance as well.
Yes, I was going to say, I'm realizing, and I'm so sorry, I never responded to your email, but the answer is yes. We think this is a great idea, and we would love to help any way we can, but we do applaud you for taking it on as community leaders with community leaders, because it does sound like that's what Community Climate Solutions says is the best way to do this kind of work. So staff can definitely be a resource for helping secure either a physical space if it's safe to do so, or a virtual space if that's determined best. And I believe if the committee would prefer that it be virtual regardless, let me know. But I'm so sorry I did not respond to your email. I was very excited about it, and then I never clicked an email saying yes.
We're moving to it now. This is great.
Okay, cool.
Of course, finding those key members of the community is the next big task.
Yes.
So.
Mm-hmm. Real quick note before, if we're going into discussion versus questions, we do have a member of the public with their hand raised. Does anyone have questions before we do public comment of the committee, of the subcommittee? No? Chair Choi, do you want to open it up to public comment?
Yeah, Jeremiah, you can speak.
Oh, one sec, Jeremiah, you almost can speak. Okay, Jeremiah.
Thank you, Chair Choi. So how does one join this Carbon Free Albany? Can you please just remind me the website, the name of the website to go to? I would love to join. And I think 2,000 is an achievable goal in 2 years. It's 1,000 a year. That's around 3 a day. So if we can just get 3 people a day, I think we're on the right track. And let me know what I could do to help. I could post up some flyers or signs or word of mouth or something. So can you just please remind me the website and how to join? Thank you.
I see no other members of the public with their hand raised.
The website is Carbon Free Albany.
Committee member Woolley.
Yeah, thank you. What Jeremiah just said reminded me of a conversation that I had with Council Member Jordan a few days ago that I've been meaning to bring up with the subcommittee, but we haven't had a meeting yet. He suggested that perhaps a forum where you spend a lot of hours, like people hours, putting together a forum that may net, not that many people. We don't really know. It may not be the most efficient use of our time and resources, and suggested instead something like flyering the whole city, just like getting some volunteers together and just flyering the whole city, because that's doable. We're a small town. It's geographically pretty condensed. But after hearing the opinion of Community Climate Solutions, and feedback that we've gotten so far from staff and from the rest of the committee, and from Jeremiah as well, I thought a thought just occurred to me that maybe in the process of doing this, we could take like some hybrid approach where we do flyering as well as hosting this forum, and maybe the forum would be like a big destination thing that would happen once we flyer everything.
Committee Member Peterson?
Yeah, I think this is great. I'm glad you guys are suggesting this because actually we've kind of been here before, and we have tried. I know Bianca tried putting on a forum and got, you know, reasonable participation, but every time we did that, we would just get handfuls of people. And we've gone to events and flyered, and I've gone to even school events. I went to an event at Marin School and promoted it. And, you know, you might get 5 or 6 people, more people. And so it's been dribs and drabs. What I really like about your idea is targeted community groups. And I think it would be, I think we should spend some time thinking about doing that. And then the hurdle that I think is difficult is that, and it's gotten a little easier with the platform, but just getting people to take the step of signing in. So I like the idea of flyering, putting flyers out, and then also having almost like a you know, an assistance thing where people can be, you know, we could actually get just people logged in. You know, if they could just tell us, yeah, I'm interested in doing this, we could set up their account, get them access, and get them going on it. You know, okay, now you fill out what your current usage is. You know, just something to make it even easier. You know, one click purchase, as Amazon does. So I think this is a good idea. I think it has to be really targeted, that we actually hit groups that have large membership and would be very interested in this. That I'm not sure off the top of my head what that is in Albany, but we should certainly brainstorm it. And I think this outreach has to be pretty aggressive with some assistance to get people to do the process rather than just telling them do it. I know we've sent the Carbon Free Albany link out in the e-blast several times. And I know Lizzie's done several meetings about it. So it just becomes very interesting. The other thing is, you know, I came up with the 2,000 off the top of my head to make a big, you know, make it a big thing that we had to think very hard about. One thing we might think about is which members of the Albany community we really want to be involved in this. You know, like the Golden Gate Towers are 400 plus units in Golden Gateway. Would it be good to just contact their organization and just try to leaflet the whole buildings? Also, UC Village, I think UC is doing kind of its own thing to address emissions, which and their tenancy turns over a lot. So we may not need to worry about the, what do they have out there, Jeff? 500, 600, 800 units or something?
Oh, it's about 970 or so units, I believe.
Yeah, it's pushing 1,000. And so that's a pretty big number, but do we really need the university housing people to sign, you know, University Village people to sign up on this? So maybe we need a strategy and pull those groups together. But I like what you're saying. I think we need to do something more than just having it there, because it's sort of stagnated again, and we need to get it going.
Committee Member Woolley?
Yeah, I think that might be something that we could do at the forum. We could have it be informational and inspirational, with all these community members coming in to learn about how they can be leaders in their own little pockets of the community, but also have like an actual instructional thing there once we have them all there, saying, look, this is how you do it, and then they can take that knowledge to their corners of the town.
Yeah, that gives me another idea is if you're doing a forum, you could do a hook on it similar to the online forum that's just happening now that Lizzie talked about. You know, the electrification, you could say electrification in Albany, tools that help you. There'll be, you know, 3 Albany homeowners there that have gone virtually through the total process of electrifying their homes. They can answer questions, blah, blah, blah. it could be a much more educational, far-reaching kind of event that would really attract people more to come. And I think if it was online, it would be easy for them to come. And we could have a presentation that could be made available later. So, again, getting the news out, I like the idea of flyering and maybe even doing follow-on phone banking to really try to encourage people to come.
I think one thing we talked about as sort of a interim step that I think might be important is creating a survey and pushing some of our people that we know within the community who maybe aren't participating yet, but would be willing at our direct urging to participate, and having them take a survey on how far they got along in registration and what things might have been discouraging along the way, so that we can address those directly, so that we kind of, if there is reluctance, if people get to the website and they realize that it's going to take them 20 minutes to input all their information, maybe that's something that we want to be able to address directly. So it's still, it's under construction, but we're working on a survey that we could send out to some of our own personal contacts, and we could share that with the larger committee, as long as that's not a Brown Act violation, but however we would need to do that to get some meaningful feedback, so that we can figure out what might be some of the things that are stopping people from registering.
We can find out the logistics of the survey. I can chat with our city clerk.
Lizzie, do you know if the platform, I think you're an administrator on the platform and can do modification. Does it give you at least access to the emails? Can you email to everybody that's signed up? Like, could we just use that as send a link to a questionnaire, and then if we got a 10% response, that would be great.
I believe I can email all users, but their email addresses are hidden from me. I can double check, but I believe that used to be the case. Any other comments or questions for the subcommittee? Great, this is very exciting. It'll be great to see if we can engage more community members with this platform. So thank you to the subcommittee for your work and enthusiasm on this. It means a lot to me personally, so thank you very much. Okay, Chair Choi, back to you.
Looks like we have someone from the the public that wants to speak.
Oh, you are correct. All right, one sec. Jean Wu.
Hi, I'm actually not a member of your committee, but I am a resident of Albany, and I went to a very exciting event in Berkeley that was headlined by someone named Sean Armstrong from Redwood Energy. And he's an extraordinarily good speaker, and he talks a lot about all the different ways you can electrify your home. So I think if you're thinking of doing a forum, you may want to consider asking him. He comes to the Bay Area frequently, and he can also do this online. He's extremely open to working with homeowners, and actually says he prefers working with homeowners and charging the people he normally charges, which is multifamily. So I would just recommend that would be, if you're looking for a hook, a really good one, because he's a known entity. He knows a lot, and he can explain everything in terms that anyone can understand. Thanks.
All right.
There are no other members of the public with their hand raised.
All right. Now we'll move on to item 6-2, which is a discussion about the adjustments to the CAAP work plan.
Yes. So as Jeff mentioned, the council Originally, the Climate Action Committee approved work plan from April was supposed to go to the council for consideration on last Monday's, 2 days ago, meeting. At the meeting before, the council meeting before that, sorry, I'm jumping my words. At the council meeting before this Monday, there was discussion about changing the format, or it came up for the first time, a discussion of changing the format to committee and commission work plans in general. And then at Monday's council meeting, the council discussed that topic at more in depth. And the following comments came up from the council about committee and commission work plans. I will share those comments, but to share with you the end results, there is no new format yet, but Vice Mayor Jordan and Council Member McQuaid will be meeting in between now and the next council meeting to flesh out a proposal for a new committee commission work plan. So that is not yet available. So at this time, we as staff would recommend that the committee does not finalize a new work plan this evening. But if you feel like it would be productive to start talking about these potential changes, to have a more robust discussion about it at your next meeting, that might be a good idea. I don't think it's worth spending an hour of your time making a bunch of edits to something that we don't know the finalized format of yet, but I defer to the committee on how you want to use that time. Basically, the suggestions that came up, which we can likely see will be reflected in this new format to come, there will be on every work plan, there will be an opening with a verbatim copy of what was in the previous work plan. And then there will be some kind of indication or assessment of what items in a previous work plan were completed, were started, or were never started. And then based on that, the new list of items that the committee or commission is proposing should reflect how many items were accomplished from the previous work plan. So let's say on the previous work plan, there were 10 items and only 3 were accomplished. The goal of the council would have to have around 3 or 4 items on the committee's work plan for the next 2-year cycle. And at the bottom somewhere, there will be a reflection of items that the committee could take up if time remained, if they finished everything that was in that priority list within a 2-year span, and then time remained to pick up new items during that 2-year span. So basically what the new format should do is calibrate the number of items on a work plan with the capacity that a committee or commission has to achieve those things during the 2-year work plan, to make sure that the council has a clear idea of what committee and commissions will be working on, and so that the committee and commission has clear direction on how to get things done. That is a basic assessment of what was discussed at Monday's council meeting, but again, no new format has been formalized. That will likely come in early June, which means that the Climate Action Committee will have to reconsider its work plan again in June, and then if the committee finalizes it in June, it'll go to council in July, or it can come back to the committee in July again. Does anyone have any questions on that? Committee Member Peterson?
Yeah, what is the time frame on the work plan? Is it June to June, or is it January to January, or is it calendar year, fiscal year? I've lost track of what it is.
It's technically the 2-year election cycle. So the committee, the work plan, although we work on it after the committee members are seated, it is for that 2-year cycle for which you are seated. So we're technically in the time of when your work plan would be directing your work.
Right, so it's effective now, yeah, once we get in place. So my question there is, we've got some things, we were going to present some items to try to, take advantage of DD funding and really get some real things done. do we have to wait on this until the approval of the work plan, or can we do that? Can we still be on and then the work plan comes later, even though the past work plan doesn't say anything about, I mean, can we go ahead and do that?
I think that should be fine.
Yes.
I think if we're doing that with 10 different projects, that's maybe where we would run into some trouble.
Yeah, the only thing I was going to see if it was possible is that I read through Preston's evaluation. Again, he's an engineer, he's very thorough. I fully understand what he's getting at. And it'll certainly make everyone's life easier to evaluate how progress is being done. But it is a change, and we're halfway through, we're a quarter of the way through that whole period now already. It seems like maybe could we request that the format be prepared and then we'll implement it at the next cycle? I mean, to make everybody, by the time we go through this, readjust it, go through 2-3 more sessions. I mean, we've practically got a whole year gone and we don't even have a work plan out. So, I mean, the work plans are still functional the way they're written now. It's just they would be better under this new format. So is there any way to push back on that or no? I could talk to Preston, but.
My understanding from being an attendee at the city council meeting was that there's just sort of a general sense that some of the work plans that were previously submitted had contained a bunch of items that were either kind of already completed or seemed a little unrealistic for the scope of the committee. So I think that what we can do as a climate action committee is take some of the more concrete pieces of feedback from the city council. In particular, I think it would be useful just to go through the previous work plan item by item and, literally classify as started, not started, or finished to prepare for what the new format will be. We might not know the exact format of the next work plan, but I think most of that is pretty minor. And fortunately, I think we actually have addressed many of the concerns that the council has with work plans in our previous work plan discussions. My general sense of it is that we've done a pretty good job of coming up with a realistic set of priorities. So I don't think our plan will actually have to change very much with the new format. There are just maybe 1 or 2 things that it would be useful to discuss now and then finalize once the new format is complete.
Are there any other questions on this before we open it up to public comment? Seeing none. Chair Choi, if you'd like to open it up to public comment.
If anyone from the public has anything they want to say, you can raise your hand.
I'll give it a few seconds. Okay, back to you, Chair Choi. No hands raised.
All right. So now we'll move on to item 6-3.
Oh, I think we'll move into discussion of 6.2.
Got it. All
Yeah.
right.
So like I mentioned, at this time, I leave it up to the committee, but our staff recommendation wouldn't be to spend too much time this evening rewriting a whole work plan. But if the committee would like to, as Vice Chair Chen recommended, take a look at the previous work plan and then use that as a springboard to look at the proposed work plan that will have to be recrafted at the next meeting. That's something we could do this evening, if that sounds okay to the committee. I see Committee Member Peterson's hand up.
Yeah, I mean, when this was put together, at least my efforts on it, I went back to the previous work plan and put that in already. I think I was pretty thorough about it. I mean, we could double check it if we wanted to, but I don't think we need to do that in a committee meeting. I had just one comment I wanted to make on one of the advisory statements under, I think it was item 4B. And so I'd like to kind of make that, if that's okay with everyone. If not, we want to just table this and move on. But it kind of spun into another issue of urgency, which I'm hoping would be germane to this discussion. So
Yeah, I guess I feel like the vice mayor was pretty explicit about just wanting to have like a single piece of information about each item on the previous work plan. I feel like that will definitely make it in the next work plan template either way. So I think we'll have to do that exercise, whether it's today or in one meeting. I'd prefer to just sort of knock that one out of the way. And then I guess my only other sense from being at the city council meeting was just if there are any items that we feel are maybe a little bit aspirational, it might be good to have a discussion about what those items might be, so that if that is in the new work plan template, it's more clear which items are sort of, we feel like these things are important, but they're kind of nice to haves for the current 2-year cycle.
yeah, again, I just looked at the work plan and it has 6 bullets of what the stuff was we did the prior year, and you just have to check them back. I think they all relate to what was on the prior year work plan, but that could be cleaned up. So is that something staff could make a little, just bring in the others and do it? It seems awkward to try to do it. And what I'd rather do is I wanted to focus on, we have one thing, and actually this is relevant because we did make a recommendation to the council, and I think Preston had some good reasons to sort of hold it up, but we'll go back and look at that. But there's something really critical. And I realized in reading the work plan, it currently reads that we'll only advise them to support state and federal, but what we should really say is advise the city council to endorse certain things, but also to oppose other things. And there is currently a measure before the state assembly that is going to completely destroy rooftop solar in California, and it's been put forward by the for-profit utilities. And it's a very cynical attack on what has been a very well-meaning, good program that has brought out millions of people into producing solar. And at this point, it's clear 2 committees that have approved it to go on. It's probably going to go to the legislature. And I think we need to get as many cities as possible advocating against this and contacting the legislature to oppose this bill. Unfortunately, it has support from the labor unions that work for PG&E, and they're misrepresenting it. So I just think it's important that we try to get something to city council urgently on this.
I feel like that particular item or bill, it's definitely an important issue that does seem to fall pretty far outside the scope of the Climate Action Committee work plan. That might be something that we add to a future agenda.
I respectfully disagree. I mean, we advise the city council on what they make recommendations on. I think we should also advise them on what we should clearly state to our state legislature that we oppose, because it's damaging to our whole goal, which is diminishing emissions. This is something that maintains the status quo, does long range transmission lines with big power sources where the utilities make all their money, is being promoted over doing rooftop solar, which has been the most successful way to bring about solar in California. So
I think this particular agenda item is about the work plan. We certainly can bring to the committee and then to the city council a recommendation to oppose that. I wouldn't take the language in the draft work plan literally that we can only endorse and not oppose. I think you're making a good point. But I certainly wouldn't interpret it that literally. But in terms of what's on the agenda right now, we really shouldn't be getting into the merits of or demerits of that particular legislation at this meeting tonight, because it's not on.
Well, it was just the hook. I couldn't find anything else, so I'm using it. So
yeah,
anyway.
that's what we're not supposed to do. Sorry.
Yeah, well, then we get nothing done, especially in urgent situations. So anyway, if people just want to say forget it, stop, I'm willing to stop, but I had to push it.
We just want to not violate the Brown Act.
Yeah, so I guess maybe the choice before the committee is, do we want to review the previous work plan and kind of go through that? Or I guess it sounds like this might be something that the city staff would be willing to take on. Okay.
I think that might be a better use of our time. So what I'll plan to do in between now and our next meeting is, and we might get more information on what that format is going to look like exactly, but what I can plan to do is look at the last work plan and mark completed, not started, discussed next to items, and provide an assessment for the committee for the next meeting. And we'll use that as a springboard to prepare a work plan that we think will get approved by the city council. If that sounds good to everybody, we can do that. Okay. All right. Chair Choi, back to you.
Let's move on to item 6-3, which is a possible recommendation for the Assembly Bill about zero-emission small off-road engines.
Thank you, Chair Choi. Okay, so we have before us yet another piece of state legislation that's currently going through the committee process. This is AB 1346. And as Chair Choi said, it's about emissions from small off-road engines, otherwise known as SOAR. So these types of engines, obviously off-road, so not vehicles, and they are under 19 kilowatts. That's the definition. And this is mainly lawn and garden equipment, leaf blowers, lawn mowers, that type of thing. And while these engines are fairly small, they are big polluters, especially for nitrous oxides and reactive organic gases. As you can see here in our graphic, an hour of lawnmower use or leaf blower use is equivalent to many, many miles of driving in terms of this NOx and ROG type gases. So the state is looking into legislation on this. And what this specific bill would do would be to direct CARB, the Air Resources Board, to prohibit exhaust and emissions from new SOAR on or after January 1st, 2024. So this is effectively banning the production of new gas-powered SOAR at that date. It could also potentially be pushed later. It allows the Air Resources Board to delay it if it doesn't think that that's feasible at that time. But that's kind of the goal start date is 2024. And this wouldn't affect, it wouldn't affect gas-powered SOAR that are already produced. It wouldn't be, taking away the gas-powered leaf blowers that already exist. It would just be banning the production of new ones. And then finally, the bill would require funding for incentives that would kind of aid in this transition, rebates for new electric leaf blowers and that type of thing. So that's what this bill does. It's pretty short and simple. And I'm happy to answer any questions about it. Oh, sorry, forgot to put in a staff recommendation. Just like the other ones, the staff recommendation is to recommend that council send a letter of support to the state.
Thank you, Michelle. Chair Choi?
Yeah, Committee Member Larson.
In the wording of that, it said the end the production of those kinds of engines. Is that geared towards manufacturers or is it geared towards sales of SOARs, sales of these?
This is a bill that's geared towards manufacture. I imagine there would be some amount of enforcement in the sales realm, but I think it's really based on the manufacturing.
So if a leaf blower is made in Texas and sold in California, it has no effect?
I'd have to double check the wording, but I don't think they would be able to enforce that. I think
So it's not a ban on sales of them.
Yeah, I think it's production. I can double check though.
Committee Member Peterson.
Yeah, so what about use? There's no sunset on the use of them. I mean, these things, I've seen people using old lawnmowers for years. I mean, what I'm a little worried about is first, it looks like it's good. 2024, 3 years away, it's pretty good. But then it could be moved back. So who has influence over the California Air Resources Board? Is it manufacturers of these things that say, oh, it's going to be too difficult to do it, and then so it keeps getting pushed back, doesn't happen. And then you've got existing ones still being used. It feels a little bit like this is doing something, but actually isn't. And I get a little worried once the law's in place, everyone says, hey, we've addressed that. And for the next 10 years, nothing happens, and they're still out there emitting all these negative emissions. So I'm kind of surprised it doesn't have some sort of sunset for using them at all, period.
Yeah, I can address that because that's a great point. This bill is definitely limited, but you know, in the larger context, it's kind of useful background that the governor recently signed an executive order which requires a complete zero emissions from SOAR in 2030. So that would, you know, ban the use of this equipment as well. So that's kind of where the sunset for all of these things comes in. So this bill, I think, is really meant to be like a piece that's headed towards accomplishing the governor's goal, but not addressing all of those pieces, if that makes sense.
That's great to know. So there's an executive order from the governor, which I guess could be overturned once he's out of office, to eliminate use of all SOAR by 2030.
Of gas power.
Whether they're used or new or whatever. It's not like selling them, it's using them.
Yeah. I think the goal specifically is to achieve zero emissions on SOAR by 2030.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions for Michelle?
Yeah, just a quick question, Michelle. So if the city of Albany kind of endorses this bill, is there a particular group that's looking for endorsement, or how's that endorsement actually used to further the bill?
Generally speaking, just like with the other bills that have been endorsed by the city council, the mayor would send a letter to the legislator who's sponsoring the bill. And when they're presenting it and trying to convince the other people in the legislature and the committees to pass the bill, they kind of have a list of the supporters that goes along with that to kind of work as a tool to, you know, show all of the support across the state and convince the other legislators to vote for
it. Committee Member Peterson?
I'm kind of interested, how did this end up getting on the CAAP agenda? Because I remember we had some conversations about leaf blowers and it keeps popping up. Did staff come across us and decide, hey, this is a match, so we should bring it to CAAP? And if so, like going back to the bill I'm concerned about for, you know, that's going to be hugely impactful on rooftop solar, should I notify staff that, hey, we need to get this on the agenda? What's the process for getting these on the agenda? Because I actually think the other assembly bill is more important than this one. But I think this one we need to work on, we need to be behind too.
Committee Member Peterson, I believe you emailed me about this one and I forwarded it to the chair and vice chair for consideration for putting it on the agenda. And that is the format to go about to get it on the agenda.
Oh, okay. Well, that's great. Thank you for doing that. I forgot I did that.
Already a master of the process.
Any other questions? We do have a member of the public with their hand raised. Not? Chair Choi, do you want to open it to public comment?
Yeah. Jeremiah, do you want to speak?
Jeremiah?
Hi, how are you? Thank you very much. So this is a great thing, right? You know, if something's bad for the environment, and we're trying to find a solution to correct it. I'm all for it. Obviously, that's common sense, right? So the whole deal with this, getting rid of the gas-powered leaf blowers and the gas-powered lawnmowers, the small appliances, the weed eaters, I have a concern a little bit on what happens, during a rolling blackout or a brownout, because we're in California and the governor always shutting down our electricity. So what happens then? I guess blackout and brownouts are only for a day or so or two, but so there's going to be these things that are going to happen, and then we can't, mow our lawns or some sort of thing like that. There's going to be a lot of transitions, like there's to be expected. So there's going to have to be a disposal some way to recycle, some way to recycle your old gas power lawnmower or something, or because someone's going to get rich off of this policy. All the people that are making electric things, the battery companies. But this is to help the environment and to cut down the noise in our backyards. It looks like it's 4 years away, so nothing's really going to happen for 4 years. So we got some time. But let's say my grandpa still wants to use his old lawnmower or his weed eater. What's going to happen if he does it? What are the consequences? Let's say someone keeps using it. Are they breaking any laws? Are they going to get fined? I mean, this whole thing could get pretty ridiculous, but I mean, our heart's in the right place. We're trying to reduce emissions wherever we can. And you're right, a lot of these two-stroke engines mixed with oil, right? It gets all over the place, all over the ground, and there's no smog regulations on these small appliances. So, yeah, well, I'm all for this. Good luck with everything. We got some time for this, and maybe in Albany we're gonna have to have a day to where there's a free pickup day for our old lawnmowers and things. Keep up the good work.
There are no more attendees, so no more hands raised. Back to the committee for discussion.
Committee Member Peterson.
Yeah, so I think Jeremiah once again brings up some excellent points. And actually, I've thought about this a little, and maybe later we could talk about this, but I'm willing to make a motion. It just seems like there could be an opportunity to provide like electric tool lending facility. We did have a tool library in Albany, but I think they got rid of all the power tools. It sounds like it was a lawyer recommended thing. But it might be possible to have a lending for local landscape people to start using these. They're becoming more apparent. But I think we need to do this. The level of pollution from it is just horrible, and it'll be better. So I'm totally in favor of us pushing this forward.
Yeah, and to maybe piggyback off of Member Peterson's comments, I believe that part of the bill sort of directs the state board to identify sources of funding for commercial entities to replace gas-powered equipment with electrical equipment. So I think that's entirely consistent with the approach that the bill recommends.
I'm just going to jump in here to make a small correction. I said the governor's order was by 2030. It's actually 2035. A small note. Want to make sure the record's right. Sorry.
I'll correct it in the minutes, Michelle.
Thank you.
If there's not too much more discussion, I'd be happy to put forward a motion to endorse the bill.
I second.
Vice Chair Chen,
Aye.
Committee Member Larson,
Aye.
Committee Member Merchant,
Aye.
Committee Member Peterson,
Aye.
Committee Member Woolley,
Yes.
Chair Choi.
Aye.
Motion carries. Back to you, Chair Choi.
All right. Now we have an update from the Zero Emissions Transportation Action Plan Subcommittee.
So I had a question. Michelle, were you going to pull up the slides, or is that something you wanted me to do?
I can pull them. I don't have them handy. I thought you would be doing it, but I can pull them up if that's
No,
easy.
I got them right here. So let's see. Let me get to it. Oh, it's loading. So, sorry for the delay in loading. So the Zero Emission Transportation Subcommittee has been meeting and going over our draft plan. And we came up with this little presentation. Everyone can see that, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So I remember Eric Larson, myself, and Graham Woolsey participated in this, and we've been working on this for quite a while. And we do have a multi-page outline of a lot of actions and things to do. But just to put it into context, we've shown this. Michelle's put together a graph before, and we've shown this. And you know, it shows what we want to do and the outside forces that are kind of happening, and how we would drive this curve of, oops, sorry. Gosh, there's so many things in the way, of annual purchases up, so that the total percent is, you know, you get to 100% by sometime around this date, 31, and then, you know, you would hit 100% of your all vehicles once the other ones went away, way out here at 45. But this was really looking at just only passenger vehicles. It wasn't looking at all sorts of other things. So there's, again, with zero emission transportation, there's also the idea of reducing the amount of vehicle miles traveled, period. So essentially what you're doing is you're changing the zero line up by just saying, well, everybody's going to drive less if we have better opportunities for them to do that. And if you do that, and this is all hypothetical, but if you do that, then you can skew this line. You know, it's also skewing this line, which you know, this line may be the same, but this is being made up by people just stopping using vehicles. And you could skew this line and get adoption maybe even, you know, 5 to 9 years earlier than that, which would be much better as far as what the scientists are telling us. So anyway, this is just kind of how our thoughts around this have changed. And to sort of back this up, Michelle did a lot of studying of, I think this was out of data that's available from the, I'm pulling a blank on what is it anyway. Where
a survey that Bianca put together.
Did she actually survey Albany folks, or did she just pull this data out of the census?
No, this was a survey that we conducted.
Oh, okay. So this is some maybe not super scientific cross-section of the Albany population. And what we saw was that single family home owners are having kind of no problem, let's see, you know, getting EVs and using them. Renters may be having a bit more of a problem, but the real problem is, and remember, renters here, so this orange and this yellow constitute supposedly half the households in Albany because they rent. So all of these, but especially these, are not getting much saturation in doing this. So what else would be helpful to them? And I think this, yeah, I didn't do that. Okay. So in the draft zero emission transportation plan, and I can give everyone a link to sort of look through this. I think these were kind of the main points. We considered plans developed by surrounding local governments and then considered actions that were most motivating and would work well in Albany. So rather than reinvent the wheel or try to collect, I mean, most of the data that we could get access to was pretty limited. Most of it came from the DMV registration for the Albany zip code area and just looking at the type of vehicles people own. And then getting, you know, that's where we got by 20, I think the last was 2018. There was something like 4 or 5% EV or plug-in hybrid ownership in Albany of all vehicles. So not of households, just of all vehicles. So some households have multiple vehicles. So focus on getting most challenged commuters away from single passenger vehicle trips in gas-powered vehicle. So the idea there is that, you know, this means bringing in other modes of just, you know, endorsing active transportation, public transportation, other ways of getting around, even just, you know, active includes walking. Priority actions was #1 priority action was public, alternative, and active transportation, reduce vehicle trips and ownership. So making these an alternative, I would say, would be alternative to a single occupancy vehicle. So alternative could include ride hailing, electric scooter usage, bicycling. Bicycling is more under active, I guess. So again, not just replacing your car, but also reducing vehicle trips traveled by electric vehicles, which would use less energy and create less congestion and problems on the road. So #2, zero emission vehicle access by low income and renters. So try to increase their ownership of these type of vehicles where it's most challenging. So if you don't have a place to charge it, that becomes a big impediment. If you don't have a place to keep it, that's a big impediment. If it's too expensive, that's a big impediment. So all of those can be addressed. Zero emission vehicle ownership by mid and high income, you know, push the capable off fence sitters to do the right thing. I think there are a lot of people, I see a lot of new, my neighbor just up the street bought a brand new something, it's a fully gas powered car. You know, why did you get that instead of an electric car? I mean, they're virtually, you know, they've come way down in price. So it's probably some hurdle like range anxiety or just unfamiliarity that's pushing people to do that. So we could do much more directed push on that. Work to implement actions using DD funded funds that will bring about immediate results. So this is the key one that I'm going to talk a bit more. So partner with existing entities, incentives to leverage funds, try on a limited scale pilot projects and evaluate results before making widely available. So that means try these programs. So I think one thing that stymies us is we want to get, you know, a completely worked out, successful, is a BETO thing going to work? Well, we did a pilot with that and we sort of determined it didn't work very well, but we should try another pilot. I mean, you try one way, you try another way. I think, you know, if you're going to succeed at something, you have to try a lot of times. And the idea of having limited scale pilot projects, we can approach several problems simultaneously, find out which one works best, move on, make it a little bit better. So that there's a flexibility there that I think would be very beneficial. So publicize successes and use pilot projects as outreach for generating further interest. and again, this comes down to making use of DD funds successful and convincing the people who voted it through that it was a good measure. And in a couple of years, when we asked to modify it so that we can tax gas more and electricity less as an incentive to electrify, we'll have more of a chance, and we may even be able to get a 2/3 majority, in which case it can be much more directed funds, and we don't need to worry about it just falling into the general funds. So these were some things I came up with, and there are a lot of them, and some of them are a little pie in the sky, but I thought we'd just run through them and just so you get the idea of what we were thinking about. So start outreach and negotiations with BART, AC Transit, UC Berkeley, and Bay Area Air Quality Management District to implement a local loop electric shuttle bus to serve these high density housing hubs that we want in San Pablo and Solano, and tie them in with BART, similar to what Emeryville does with their little. They have a bus system. It isn't electric, but they have a bus system that connects BART to the more commercial districts of Emeryville. So that's maybe something to do a little later. Partnering with funds to establish third-party pilot projects of electric bike scooter rental program. So that would be trying to bring in some of these, Lime scooters and others into the city, and actually making it less of a risk for them, possibly. I don't know what the details are. Use DD funds to launch a pilot residential area parking management pilot. That would be done in tandem, probably with the large project on San Pablo at the Albany Bowl. Kind of kill two birds with one stone, is get something started as far as parking management, and then also fund it so it happens well and people are glad to see it in place. Otherwise, they'll oppose the housing. So I think there's an opportunity there. This probably has to be more timed with what's going on with planning approvals and projects being built in Albany. Although it could be the project, the affordable housing project down on Cleveland, is it Cleveland? Might be a place to do a pilot along Washington, just to keep the residents happy, Anyway, we have some funds, we could do it. So EV Resource Center and assistance for renters and low income qualified to assist with acquiring a ZEV. That's an idea. This one's probably more doable now, and we can model it off of what they've done in Portland. Cal Conservation Corps interns to outreach to target rental population door to door to promote EV Resource Center, zero-emission transportation rebates, and high-value fast pass cards. That's another way that, there's a program, a state program, I don't think it's through Bayron, I forget who does it, where you can trade in an old junker car and get credit for towards an EV, or you can just get a huge amount on a transit card and use it for public transit. And people might prefer that. EV multifamily building charge station pilot project, that one would be pretty great to do forward. So I think 6 is a really easy one to work on. Work with Uber and Lyft to identify high ride-hailing drivers who live in Albany and provide assistance and incentive to move to an EV. So this is actually incentivizing ride-hailing and then helping with it moving to electric for folks in Albany. So at least, we know the people that are driving a lot and coming back to Albany are using clean vehicles. Partnering with funds to establish third-party public charging points at key locations near multifamily housing. This one's quite a hurdle. Those things are expensive, but if we're gonna put in available third-party charge points, we want them in areas that are going to be helpful to business districts and to multifamily housing users. Income-based sliding scale rebate incentives for home level 2 EV charge station install tied to phase in of point of sale mandated EV charger installation. So this is again something that would start as just it's an incentive only program, and then later it becomes something that's required, but everyone's ready for it because they've already benefited. So again, I think staff has an idea of which ones of these will best fly. and I'll let staff comment on that, and look forward to hearing other people's comments. Thank you. And oh, I'm sorry, if Michelle or Graham had any other comments they wanted to add, please do.
No, I think you pretty much covered it.
I was just going to add in our last discussion with Jeff was, I think, fairly enlightening about, what our EV action plan or zero emission transportation plan needed to look like. And as you showed in here, most of these have CAAP, basis. They're already in the climate action plan. So we don't, we're not saying we want to take a brand new plan to council. This is just sort of like the implementation activities that the Zero Emission Transportation Committee kind of prioritize out of the CAAP. And like Jeff said, there's, we can just start doing some of the stuff. So it's pretty exciting. So I was very excited about the idea that there's very little, let's create a plan about this. It's very much, let's go do this stuff, or let's act on this stuff. So that was a big focus of our subcommittee.
Yeah, and actually, I want to just, if other committee members are a little confused about that, I was kind of thinking, and this started over a year ago, that because in, I think one of these, I can't remember if it's 1.1.7 or if it's 1.2.1, but it actually says in the CAAP, develop a EV action plan. And so we thought we had to put together this whole carefully, you go to other city sites and they have, Berkeley has something called their EV roadmap. And they have a very well researched with all sorts of traffic data and ownership data and stuff. And then, input from the public, blah, 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 countless hours of staff time devoted to this. And they came up with this plan, which of course is very parallel and has a lot of ideas that are relevant to any little community. So we realized we've got an outline of how which we could expand into a very elaborate study, but we've got the outline. We know where we want to put the energy, and these actions are one we thought were somewhat doable, some more than others. So we don't need to wait till that plan is in its final, ready to go to publisher format. I can give the link to it to Lizzie, and she can share it with all the committee members, and you can go through it. Going back to the CAAP, these are directly relevant to what the CAAP has put forward as we should be pursuing. So this puts the closer detail to it and gives us something we can actually start to implement now with funds that are available through the DD.
And I'll just jump in quickly and add that, as staff, we kind of looked through these and thought that at least for the near term, probably the most feasible ones to really get started on would be 6, 8, 6, 8, and 9, maybe without the point of sale mandates, at least related for now. But those 3 were the ones that we were sort of focused on as staff the most, just for context.
If there are no questions, maybe we should open it up to public comment. Chair Choi?
Yeah, if anyone from the public has anything they want to say, they can unmute themselves or raise your hand.
Raise your hand. I'll give it a couple seconds. If anyone in the audience has a public comment on this item, raise your hand, please. No hands raised. Chair Choi, back to you.
All right. We can move on to our discussion about it.
Well, I'd like to query. I'm pretty much in agreement with what Lizzie said as far as what, 6, 8, and 9. What would be good is to look at this and say, what do we feel comfortable actually going and presenting to the city council as saying, we want to pursue these and, actually put forward maybe some ballpark budgets for DD funds that we would like to use to pursue these. Does anyone have any thoughts about that? Is there other ones that people feel are more important? I kind of like 2.
I'm a little curious. So I'm sure you guys have spent a lot more time researching and discussing this than I have, but I think it would be interesting to consider maybe things that are perhaps a little less ambitious in addition to a lot of the zero emission vehicle transportation initiatives. Like, for example, I think one thing that's pretty unique about Albany is talking to my wife about growing up in Albany. She said that she almost always walked to school, both to and from school growing up. And I know that, I didn't grow up in Albany and living in other cities. My parents always had to drive a car and drop me off. So I'm kind of curious whether the subcommittee has ever looked into just things like school crossing guards, or I know these things are maybe a little less exciting than electric vehicle charging stations, but in many ways might be more uniquely suited for the character of our tiny urban village.
I'll just jump in real quick, Vice Chair Chen. Thank you for your historical anecdote. Topical conversation. The Transportation Commission and the City Council work together to do crossing guards specifically and more of that active transportation stuff, especially as it relates to getting to and from schools. So if that's something you are interested in as an individual, I encourage you to check out what the Transportation Commission is doing.
Committee Member Peterson.
Yeah, yeah, that's definitely, so active transportation is definitely part of it. I think the problem is, I remember I walked to school all the time. I even walked to school when I was like in 2nd and 3rd grade. I mean, mommy didn't go along at all. You just were on your own. We live in a different time, and it's so ubiquitous to just jump in your car. People are commuting to work. They just do it, and you get this traffic jam around schools. You can put all the crossing guards you want out there. The ones near the school somewhat work, but I don't think anyone, I think if we're gonna try, I agree it would be good to have something that tried to get more kids to school through active transportation. And maybe that involves having people that would actually, the walking school bus, having people that would actually collect kids and they would go together, this kind of stuff. But people have now worked it into their commute routine to just take their kid to school in a car. And it's really sad because walking to school is, I think, an important part of childhood. You have time to be with yourself and think about what you're doing and be in the environment, and just, puttering to school in a car. So I wasn't sure how, what can we do? And I'm thinking of what Preston has said. If you ask people to volunteer, if you just do a lot of stuff and you give them a lot of information, please do this, they're just going to go no. So you have to either buy them out or mandate that they do it. Well, we can't really mandate, but maybe we could have an incentive program where if people got enough points, they'd win, they'd get a new bicycle, or there'd be a new cargo bike that would be available or something like that. I mean, maybe there can be, but then you've got to monitor it and you've got to do it. So I think it's a great thing, but it was hard to come up with something that would implement it. We could talk to the Traffic Commission about whether more traffic guards would really incentivize people to take their kids to school or let their kids walk to school. But again, I think it's this mindset that's just been, everyone's got to buy a big heavy SUV because it's the most safest car, even though it makes it unsafe for everybody else. We've just been programmed to think we have to have cars and people have to get around in cars. So that's a real hard thing to address.
I guess I would say to community member Chen, there's a lot of behavior to change in society in general, and certainly walking, active transportation, biking. So everything is on the table. So I don't want, our committee was very conscious about not just focusing on electric vehicles as the only solution. So, you'll see in here, there's public transportation and there's, ride hailing, kind of stuff. So we did consider that. So we're open to, suggestions, but like Nick said, it's it's all about changing behavior. So finding those levers. I guess if we're discussing priorities, I think number 6 is a really good candidate. I agree with Michelle. I think that was one of the ones you identified. That's a nice, tidy little project that could show, real change, a real result, and be very visible, and also target the group that we really need to, get on board is the multifamily housing. So I really think that's a nice one for the city staff to really consider in the short term.
I find it a little hard to discuss priorities without knowing the overall budget of DD funds and how much each individual item might cost, even ballpark. I think we could have some ideas around which ones would be easiest to implement and which ones might be reasonable cost, but I find that aspect of it a little hard to analyze and set priorities, because maybe there are 3 things that we could do for the same cost as one thing, if that makes sense.
I guess just maybe a process question. I think one of the next items on the agenda is the city council budget. I guess, do the members of the committee feel like it would be more productive to sort of have that discussion in the context of that agenda item, or sort of go over, I guess this would be more specific to the Zero Emissions Transportation Active Plan priorities?
I can quickly share that the agenda for this meeting came out before the city council meeting, which was the first city council meeting, maybe not the first, but the most recent city council meeting in which the council discussed the budget. And there actually isn't too much of an update. DD was not discussed at all. So we have no updates for you on how the council discussed DD. So as it stands right now, the committee made a recommendation to council at the last meeting about how to recommend that the council consider appropriating Measure DD. And I think, Jeff, correct me if I'm wrong, if the committee wanted to reopen that discussion, that would be appropriate for the next item. If it's to reconsider the recommendation about what Measure DD will be spent on, that would be the agenda item to do it. If we're just discussing how to prioritize actions on this list we're looking at, that would be this agenda item. Does that help clarify, or did I make it more confusing? Uh-oh, I'm just seeing stares.
Well, I had kind of a response on that. I think, and Jeff can correct me if wrong, I think there's somewhere around 250,000 a year that is supposedly supposed to be directed towards CAAP activity. So, we don't have to burn it all every year. It can be accumulated and used, I guess, for a certain amount. And the idea is just to get something started. So all of these, some of these are, I mean, obviously one is a big deal. And if it was really funding that, it would be probably use it all up right away. But I think what we want to do is just get some pilots going that would, be in the $10,000 to $20,000 range, and get some results and then be able to be scaled up. So we're not talking about blowing the whole budget. And I think we could put those numbers together later. I think some of them, like 6, probably has a lead in to getting us some information about approaching multifamily building owners, landlords, and approaching multifamily building tenants about the viability of EVs, which is data we really need. So that's a, if we spent some money on that, and we got a couple chargers out of it, but we got a process that we could scale up, that would be well worth it. So I think that's the way to kind of think about it. It's hard right now to actually say, we're going to spend 65,000 on this and whatever. But I think a lot of the idea of doing it as a pilot, the idea was it would be a very limited scope and manageable, without going out and hiring expensive consultants and buying a lot of expensive equipment. So these need to be developed out a little further. And Jeff, I guess my question is, do we have to have a budget range when we go in and ask to develop these, or do we just go and say, we want to do this, we'll come back to you with a budget when we get it more worked out?
Well, I think we should, for the committee's purpose, I think we should further develop these, pick a few of these that we further develop. I think once you go to the city council and ask them to make a decision, yes, you do want to have a fiscal impact analysis ready for them. And you also want to ask them to make the formal appropriation at that point in time. So, whenever you get a policy decision, you also want to get the money associated with that policy decision simultaneously. I think using, let's say, 6 as an example, we could do some analysis over the next month or two and come up with an estimate of what we think we might need to do a couple pilot projects. It'd be a bit of a guess, but we could, I think we could come up with a reasonably good number, and we could do that for a couple of these others if you wanted us to. And then you can compare that to potentially what might be made available by the city council. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, no, that's good. So I don't know if anybody else has some thought. I mean, I have a few that I think are good, and maybe we could, I guess, narrowing it down to 3 is realistic. I mean, 3 or 4.
Yeah, I guess we're kind of going into discussion on 6-5, so I don't know if we want to formally move on to that part of the agenda.
I would think that if you're discussing items you want staff from this list to investigate further before the next meeting, that would be fine to continue it as a piece of this agenda item, because we're not discussing council budget priorities as a whole, but just specifically on this list, maybe picking 2 or 3 that between now and the next meeting, like Jeff mentioned, staff can come up with potential cost estimates that can be thrown out there. I think that would still fit in with this agenda item.
And as Lizzie said earlier, we don't have, you'll soon hear, we don't have a lot to report on 6-5 right now.
Yeah, it could be a 2-minute agenda item.
Yeah, I just had a couple of comments from the city council discussion on, it's fairly instructive, I think, and kind of a similar use case. The council discussed the soda tax recently and how to spend the funds from that. And kind of the way that conversation went, the format of that was pretty simple. For some of the advisory committees, basically presented a list of 3 or 4 priorities that they felt were really important to the city, and had a super high level ballpark cost estimate for it. So, like this thing would be about $10,000 or whatever. And then the council kind of discussed like, oh, we think that, there's general agreement that these 3 or 4 items seem pretty important, and we should devote some more staff time to exploring them further. So I guess I'm kind of curious if something similar is likely to occur with Measure DD funding. I'm not sure if that's sort of the next part of the budget. Like, I'm not sure if DD is actually qualified as a special revenue fund or whether it's just part of the general fund.
How about if we go to 6.5, we give you a brief overview of what happened or didn't happen, and then maybe we come back to this agenda item. We usually don't do that, but I think, strictly speaking, we can revisit an agenda item during the course of the meeting. I think that might help inform the discussion.
I think that's a good idea.
If that's okay, Chair Choi, that's acceptable to you, I could go ahead and dive into 6.5.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So the this agenda was put out last week before we knew what happened at the city council meeting. There was 2 agenda items in a study session. The first part, and 2 hours set aside for the agenda for the study session. The first part was the sugar sweetened beverage tax, which is a tax that had it was a general tax, but meaning it goes into the general fund, but the measure, the wording approved by the city voters specifically called for a process of the city council consulting, I think, 3 or 4 different committees and commissions for input on what to do with those funding every other year or every year. So what process you were seeing there was really kind of mandated by the voters. The Measure DD didn't have a similar process. It's not to say we can't do it, but we don't have to do it if we don't want to, whereas we had to do that to kind of keep faith with the voters on the sugar sweetened beverage tax. They ended up spending a lot, I don't know, probably an hour and a half or more talking about the sugar sweetened beverage tax, and not a lot of time talking about the overall budget. As Lizzie mentioned, they didn't get to Measure DD. I do know council members are interested in that, and there are other measures as well. So there were some questions asked, and the finance director is going to come back, I believe, at our next city council meeting to give more detail on that. One of the insights I've kind of picked up in talking about some of these tax measures is there is a difference between how accountants account for the money and how most of us think about the money, and how, the distinction is kind of between accounting and accountability. As far as the technical accounting goes, the Measure DD is a general tax. It goes into the general fund, and it kind of gets thrown into that big bucket. And that, of course, is not what you're looking for. You're looking for that to be accounted for separately. And so that's the distinction that is a little tricky here, and that we're getting kind of caught between the accounting and the accountability parts of this. So that's one important thing, and I think the finance director understands that and is going to try to figure out a way to bridge that difference. The second thing I mentioned is, and the commission, the city council didn't really get into this in depth, but the city is running a budget deficit. And so theoretically, if the city council wanted to apply the Measure DD funds to regular routine city business, they could. They have legally that discretion. Although clearly the voters, when they approved this, had the expectation that 1/3 of the new revenues would go into climate action related activities. So that's a city council policy decision that I'm sure they'll be wrestling with in the coming weeks and months. The third point I'd make is this is not a special, again, it's a general fund. So at the end of the year, if there's leftover money, technically from an accounting perspective, it gets put into the general fund reserve and it carries forward. There's the commitment from an accounting sense doesn't carry forward from one year to the next. It's unlike some funds where, say, on those of you that own homes, if you have a property tax bill, there's something on there for the sewer fund. That sewer fund stays a separate account, and that always stays in sewers. This is different. It goes into the general fund, and if we don't spend it this year, theoretically, again, the city council next year could use it to buy, equipment for the public works department or something. So that just a little bit more context and background. I don't know what's going to happen at all with the city council and the discussion of DD funds. I think committee member Peterson was right. There was 200, the overall estimate was around $900,000 on more revenue, and that 1/3 was going to be 200 and something thousand. I forget exactly the math, but I could pull that up if necessary. That right now, it doesn't show up in the budget document that's been made public so far, but I'm hoping that we all will see that in future documents. So maybe I'll pause there, see if there are any questions about all of this so far.
I think that was an important distinction to make, is that there's no sort of if there's no carryover. It's not like if we spend 100,000 this year, then we would expect 300,000 next year, 100,000 to carry over or something like that. So that's a good distinction. Thanks for making that.
And the good example to use of this is exactly what has happened this year, which is we've budgeted, I think, $140,000 for crossing guards in the last year. Well, we haven't needed them except for the last 3 or 4 weeks. So there's been a big cost savings. Did that stay in the kind of the sugar sweetened beverage bucket? No, it went into the city's overall just basic checking account, reserve account for the general fund. And there was a city council discussion about that the other night, about whether that was what was intended or not. But legal, it's perfectly legal. It's legitimate and in fact appropriate from an accounting perspective. But then, does that honor the actions that were taken by the voters? That's a policy decision for the council to make.
Because the actual measure of DD, it's a general fund, but there's the wording was something like the city will endeavor to spend 1/3 of it on CAP related activities, right?
I believe that was the word. Yeah, something to that along those lines. Absolutely. Were there other questions? Committee member Peterson?
Yeah, so when we've talked about this before, I think rather than waiting for the city and the budget director and people who are, thinking about this in a certain way to say, oh, here are these funds, we've designated this chunk of it per the measure request, not requirement, just request, into here, and we're notifying, the Climate Action Committee, please let us know. We're going to have to be more proactive than that. And I think that's why we're going through this process of trying to bring these forward, is so that we can literally go into city council and say, hey, we all remember when we passed this measure DD and we couldn't make it specific because we were concerned it wouldn't pass, but you guys supported it and you agreed to endeavor to put it to these things. And now we have these things and they're in this sort of range of cost. We would like to start using this money on these projects. And I think that's how we have to do it. Is that what you would advise, Jeff? I mean,
yes. And you've taken was your last meeting, you identified 3 bullet points of items, general categories of items that you'd like to see these funds applied to. So I think when the city council reconsiders or continues their discussion on the budget, it'd be well served for one or more of you to be at that meeting to reinforce that.
Right. I just want to quickly stress that last thing Jeff said. I think one thing I want to remind the committee is that as staff, Jeff, Michelle, and I are technically all supposed to be neutral, and we can convey what the committee says. But beyond that, I think having the committee's voice at these meetings is helpful. And from what I hear, only one committee member attended the last council meeting, in which there were a number of CAC items on the agenda. And if there are no CAC members to speak to it, there's no narrative there. So I encourage you all to keep an eye on council agendas, particularly when CAC items are going to the group.
Yeah, no, that's a great point, and I apologize for not being there. I thought somehow that went away. I didn't have it on my calendar. So maybe getting more than a 2-hour reminder would be helpful too. So
I cannot commit to reminding every time about council. I'm sorry,
yeah,
but I won't remember that.
Yeah, that's fine. That was
too much going on. I'm just trying to remind myself to be there. So I kind of defer to you all to take that on as your personal responsibility.
Well, should we go back to the list and try and identify the priorities that we were doing? And while we're doing that, I just want to say I do like the idea of the pilot program that was discussed. I think that seems like it would gain a lot of knowledge from that we could apply to different things moving forward. I also really like the idea of having a charging station that's more public, where we could, I don't even know if we put a sign saying that it was, supported in part using Measure DD funds, but something that feels a little more visible in the community in a more in a business district. That seems also impactful in a different way.
Yeah, I think you bring up a really good point, which part of this is to have successes that are visible and people recognize as happening, real use of revenue to do real, provide real services. So the other thing I'm glad that was brought up, and Jeff pointed out, is that we do have two other areas. There's the green infrastructure and then electrification, where we're hoping to have 2 or 3, or even just at least one use of DD revenue also. So I think having 3 of these is good, because we're going to have at least 2 more or 4 more coming from those other issues. There's a little bit of overlap in some of these, like providing charging gets into sort of electrification in general. But so I was going to, does anybody want to, I would suggest we could go one by one, and if people say, hey, we think this is worthy, or if someone wanted to just make a step. Well, the city, the city staff recommended 6, 8, and 9. And let's see, where was the 8 was one that was brought up too. I'm certainly okay with any of those. Anybody have any thoughts on that? Chair Choi, maybe the thing to do is just poll people,
Sure.
And just say which.
Yeah, sure. Or could we go in roll call order?
Yeah, I can do the roll call, Chair Choi, if that's helpful. Vice Chair Chen.
6, 8, and 9 seem reasonable to me.
Committee Member Larson.
6, 8, 9 seem reasonable. I like number 4 as well, and 5. I think that especially enlisting something like a volunteer organization, interns to access but yeah. So 4, 5, 6, 8, 9. But yeah, 6, 8, 9, 4, 5. How about that?
Committee Member Merchant.
I will also put in for 6, 8, and 9. And even before Eric said it, I was going to say that 5 sounded like it could be a good use of resources that might not be that expensive to implement. So 6, 8, 9 plus 5.
Committee Member Peterson.
Yeah, I think I'm going to say 2, 6, and 8.
Committee Member Woolley.
I really like the look of 4 and 6 and 8.
Okay, Chair Choi.
5, 8, 9, just to second like what committee member Merchant said about making the effects of Measure DD more public. I like that.
Great. Quick pin in this conversation, we are approaching 9 o'clock, which is our established meeting end time. So if someone would like to make a motion to extend the meeting to whatever time you want to extend it to, now would be a good time to do that.
Sure, I'll make a motion to extend it to, let's see, 9:20.
I'll second.
I think I heard Larson first. Sorry, I mean Merchant. I heard Merchant first. Race to the second. For 9:20, okay. Vice Chair Chen.
Aye.
Committee Member Larson.
Aye.
Committee Member Merchant.
Aye.
Committee Member Peterson.
Aye.
Committee Member Woolley.
Yes.
Chair Choi.
Aye.
Meeting extended to 9:20. Back to the discussion of 6-4. We, as staff, I think, have notes. It sounds like 6, 8, 9 were the winners, but I can do an official offline tally just to check. And I think what it sounds like the plan is staff will take the top 3 and we will flesh out some numbers for what we think these pilot projects might cost to influence potential future recommendations from the Climate Action Committee to the Council on how to use Measure DD funds. Does that sound correct to everyone?
Great. Thank you.
Great. Back to you, Chair Choi.
So are we moving on to the presentation? Are we done with that discussion? Sorry.
I think we're now going, we went from 6-4 to 6-5 to 6-4, and now, Chair Choi, if it sounds right to you, we will go to 6-6.
Yeah, okay. So now we have another look at the presentation on the Climate Action and Adaptation Plan's Key Performance Indicators.
Chair Choi. So I was really curious what would be helpful for all of you committee members if you'd like me to run really quickly through the presentation I gave last month again, or if you'd just like to go straight into questions and discussion. I remember last month it was getting towards the end of the night and we decided to table it and bring back the discussion this month. So if you would all like to just kind of jump straight into the discussion, if you kind of remember where we were, or if you'd like to run through it again, either way is fine with me. Yes, Member Peterson.
I think you had a couple sort of summary charts, right? That sort of made the point of where we're trending. Maybe, I don't know, I would be happy just to see those. And then I don't know if there's a whole lot of, we can comment, but I also think this touches on the aspect of East Bay community energy and the default basis that we're talking about. And I attended the East Bay Community Energy Board of Directors meeting today to make some comments and learn something out of the comments that there's another option we can have. Although I know we already kind of visited that, but there's something that maybe is a win-win. So if we show those charts, I could touch on that too.
Okay, well, it looks like there were some nods to that suggestion, so I'll jump into those then. So this is our 2019 emissions by source pie chart here. Again, showing mainly coming from transportation and then gas, both residential and non-residential. Comparison from 2017 and 2019. Saw that decrease in buildings and transportation, a slight overall decrease. We talked briefly about the huge drop in electricity emissions, but actual slight growth in natural gas emissions. And then this was our long-term chart that shows how we're doing relative to the CAAP goals. I think these are all of the kind of overall charts. Should I show a few more, or does that feel useful enough for everyone?
Michelle, didn't you have the overview slide?
Overview slide.
Yeah,
Maybe
that.
all the way at the bottom.
Yes, that's right. Oh, all the way at the bottom. At a conclusion.
Conclusions.
Helpful.
That might be helpful.
Yes. Thanks, Lizzie. Yes. So conclusions overall, we're generally on track. Natural gas use really dipped a lot in the 2000s, but it started to creep up. So while we're still on track, our progress has been slowing in the last few years. Transportation is sort of a bit of a funny data source. VMT overall is increasing. However, our VMT per capita has been decreasing. So it's really just population growth that's caused more vehicle miles traveled per year. Those were some of the overall takeaways. And we can go up and show again this.
Does anyone have questions before we move to public comment?
I had one question from my notes from last time. I think one of the last slides is about recycling and waste. And I think the general trend was just that had kind of stayed really stagnant or hadn't moved forward. I guess, Michelle, do you have any insight into sort of maybe what's going on there?
Yeah, I think one of the interesting things that we can see from this is that there has been some slight decline in overall waste, but that's mainly due to a decrease in recycling. And one of my kind of hypotheses was that that was related to people just using less single-use plastic overall. But it seems like in general, the larger swings are kind of going with economic cycles, but there hasn't been a really steady overall drop in waste. There is some progress if you take it with population data. You know, there's a little bit more progress per capita than there is overall, again, because the population has been growing, but it's relatively limited. One thing I will note is that Albany is, relative to the rest of America, very, very low waste generating city. Obviously room to grow still, but you know, this isn't starting at a super high point. Yes.
Committee member Peterson.
Yeah, I notice also it looks like recycling, if I'm recycling going up is good as long as trash goes down. Is that right? I mean, I'm not quite sure how to read the recycle. It seems like we were recycling a lot, but we're starting to recycle less. Or is it just that there's less? I mean, you know, there's sort of less of everything, but then stuff goes up and it seems to follow that the recycling went up. But one thing I learned about, I watched a recent program, can't remember if it was 60 Minutes or not, very in-depth and done just before the pandemic hit. Turns out that only 10% of all plastics that Americans use get actually recycled. The rest are, you know, all crunched together and sent overseas where they're usually just thrown away or incinerated, just, you know, certain products removed and the rest thrown in the ocean. So plastic recycling is a real problem. It's actually, you know, and again, it's probably something we should really address because there's a very bad pollution aspect to it.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, the kind of the interplay between landfill and recycling. I think the decrease in recycling would be a lot more worrisome if we saw an increase in landfill waste, but we don't really see that going with it to a large extent. So like I said, I think it's more about people not using the plastic water bottles in the first place. You know, now they've got their nice metal ones instead. So there's an overall decrease in things that are being thrown out in any of the bins. But again, that's just kind of a hypothesis.
Do we have access to the waste management data on what percentages of recycling is plastic, what's paper, what's metal?
Yes, I do have access to that.
That would be great to know,
I could
especially the percentage plastic, because 90% of it is just going into the environment. It is not being recycled. Nothing past item number 3 goes anywhere. Nobody wants it.
Yeah, I can take a look into that. Any other questions?
Chair Choi, should we open it up to public comment?
Yeah, if anyone has, anyone from the public has anything to say, they can raise their hand.
We'll give a couple seconds. If the member of the public would like to speak, please raise your hand. Seeing no raised hands, Chair Choi, back to you.
All right, let's move into discussion about the presentation.
Michelle answered all the questions.
And if anyone has anything else, you know, things they'd like me to look into, like Member Pearson was talking about, you can let me know that as well.
So I'll bring up the one thing, you know, I noticed that, of course, the emissions due to electrical are way down because we were 100% sustainable. And we have this issue of whether we're going to lax off. And we had recommended going to 100% sustainable for everybody except the care users, that would then go to the Bright Choice, which has only 60%. But there's another issue, which is it sort of removes low-income people from even participating with their community in reducing emissions, and seems kind of unfair to me. There were at the East Bay Community Energy public comment session, a gal from one of the CAAs down in Southern California, gosh, I'm pulling a blank on the exact name, but I have the information. I sent her an email after the section. I can get the information over. They have 100% sustainable throughout their whole service area, which includes cities like Oxnard, which are very large percentage, you know, disadvantaged people, minority people, and people on limited income. But they've passed it in a way that there was no upcharge for the income, you know, the income qualified care participants. That was actually done by a cost shift to the other ratepayers, who would then cover them. And I'm going to try to find out how they did that. But that, I mean, in that case, not that it's, I mean, you know, we're only talking, I forget how many are in Albany, 700, 800 people that are on care account. But again, it seems, rather than just dropping them off the boat and saying, well, you guys, it's cheaper for you, too bad. It's sort of the same thing where everyone says, you know, you can't get you're going to drive an old smoggy vehicle because you're poor, so too bad for you. And it seems like we're not bringing our whole community along. So if once I get that information, I can get it to Lizzie, and maybe there's something we can advise the city council on that is actually a win all around.
Mm-hmm. This is a good time for me to remind everyone that the EBCE recommendation that the CAAP made will be going to council on June 7th. So if you would like to be there to speak to the recommendation, June 7th would be that day. And I'll also remind all committee members that if you go to the meeting to make comment, make sure to say that you are if you want to say you're a Climate Action Committee member, to say, but I am speaking on behalf of myself, unless you were expressly designated to speak on behalf of the CAAP. But in this case, we did not have that. So just make sure you get that clarifying sentence in so we don't have any Brown Act violations on our committee. But June 7th, the meeting starts at 7 p.m. That is when you should be prepared to make public comment if you so please.
So I had a question about that. Given what I just told you, if we needed a little more, what's the deadline that the city has to get information to East Bay Community Energy?
End of June. So I think the CAC's deadline to make a recommendation, we've reached it. It would have been this meeting at the latest, and we made that recommendation at the last meeting. But as far as I think that where you're going, Nick, with this recommendation is something that I can't tell you what to do, but if I were you, it might best go directly to the EBCE board. I don't necessarily think our city council could take any action to influence EBCE's product offerings, at least not on this avenue, I would think. So I would make your thoughts known directly to the EBCE board or to our city council EBCE representative, which would be Councilmember Tiedemann.
Yeah, okay. Well, I'll forward the information on to him and see if it's something we can consider. I'm not sure if it's, yeah, it might have been something that was done at actually the EBCE level because it was for the entire service area made this decision to do that. They didn't do it by individual municipalities.
I think, yeah, it would have to be an EBCE JPA decision. I don't think our city council could ask for that if the board didn't approve that.
Okay, I'll when I get the information, I'll make people aware of it. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay, seeing the time, if we have no other discussion for this item, Chair Choi, I'll pass the mic to you, but I think we can close out agenda item 6.6.
Yeah, now if anyone just has any requests for future agenda items, they can bring it up now. Yeah, Committee Member Peterson.
So I wanted to put on Assembly Bill Measure 1139 recommendation to the City Council to oppose. I've actually got a draft of the document with all the reasons, and I can share that.
Okay.
If there's no other requests, then we can adjourn the meeting.
Yay.
And thank you again to Chair Choi for her leadership over the last few months and for her participation on this committee. Chair Choi, I think I speak for all of us when we say we will miss you on this committee and wish you all the best at UC Berkeley and in your future endeavors.
Yeah,
Thank
great
you.
job.
Thank you, guys.
Good luck.
All right. Bye.